Hi there, I'm Maggie, and I grew up in a small town in central Scotland, an ex mining, ex weaving town. Um, and when I was 7, I had a best friend, um, a girl, Margaret, the same as me. We both had names that started with surnames that started with Mac, and we actually called ourselves. We're friends for years after that, and we called ourselves by our surnames, which I think was us keeping up with the boys, because the boys at that school had a habit of calling each other by their surnames, and we weren't going to be done down on that one. At school, I knew that I was a girl, and I knew that there was quite a difference with the way the boys were treated. I mean, we went in different doors for a start, and they tended to line up in front of us as well in queues. There was something about the boys always just being treated that bit better. They dominated the playground, I would say, too. But back at home in the crescent where I lived, all the kids played out together. So there were boys and girls all playing together, and we played skipping ropes. The boys played too. We played football. The girls played too. But you were being tried to be pushed into a girl box. But I was resistant to it, and I was just really lucky because my parents, my dad was a slater and plasterer, and mum was a stay-at-home housewife, and both very working class. This was a council house, but they made me and my sister and my brother feel as if we could do anything. And to be fair, my mother did do anything with my father's encouragement. So he taught her to drive. This was in the mid-60s, which was really unusual for a working class woman at that time. She eventually had her own power drill, and there was just a real crossover. And my father was a very masculine man. He was, as well as being a slater, he was a Scottish champion wrestler and a weightlifter. And I remember Mum told me a story when he was taking the pram out, well, being my brother, and he was taking the pram out because the baby was crying. And my mother said to him, so this was probably about 1948, my mother said to him, "Oh, Jock, you can't take a pram, the bairn out in the pram. You know, you're a man." To which my father replied, "He's my bairn, and I'll push him in the pram wherever I want to." And as I say, nobody would really have argued with my father. so, so I think I was brought up in a gender norms breaking family. And so when I was 7, I was a very happy child. I loved being outside, running about. My mother dressed us in trousers so that we could climb trees. I wore my brother's hand-me-downs. That's kind of the way it was. So there were no great limitations on me at all. But as you get older, of course, that starts to change because you become more aware of the boys become more aware of the girls. And I have to say that I didn't enjoy that at all. And my sister was older, so by the time I was about 11 or 12, she was into late 1960s makeup with, pancake and pale lips. And I absolutely swore I would never, ever wear makeup. And here I am sitting wearing makeup. So we all go through these stages and we come round to it. But the transition from primary school to secondary school, one of the things that still bothers me to this day is I was one of the top girls and the top pupils in the class all through primary, because I took to reading and everything very, very easily. And then when we went to secondary, 11 plus of course was done, the girls were in the school were graded for their class according to how well they'd done in 11 plus, and the boys likewise. But instead of having a mixed group of the top, the middle, and all the rest of it, the top boys class was called 1A and the top girls class was called 1B. Now, me and my friends at the time knew that was an injustice. We knew that, and we used to write on our covers of our Joshers and books, we would put on 1AB. I don't think the boys did that. They just kept 1A. So we were aware as we went through in the secondary school, I was very sporty. We weren't allowed to play basketball. I mean, football. We tried a petition to get to play football. It didn't work. We weren't even allowed to play basketball. We had to play netball because basketball was unladylike. So we were getting these messages all the time of what we could and couldn't do. But that said, there was enough that I could do with the netball and the swimming and athletics, that we were just aware we were getting a slightly less good deal. And I always swore I would keep fighting against that. But university, by the time you go, I went to university young, and by the time you go to university and you're the first out of your generation, you don't have any examples, you don't know anyone, particularly apart from just your any schoolmates that are going with you. And university, when I went to Glasgow University, only 11% of the students there were working class. And within that, I was a girl, which again put me in a minority position. And I found it, believe it or not, because I'm sitting here chatting very, very easily, I found it really difficult to speak up in tutorials. I found it really difficult to feel as though I was seen or counted in any way. And in fact, my friend who went to university with me from a working class background, she dropped out at the end of first year. It was just all too much. That said, I survived it. Another worry was, though, because I had a really steady boyfriend by that point, and in a way which I don't think boys have to worry about, we had to worry, girls had to worry very much about getting pregnant. So there were these things which were making, I had to work my way. If I was doing swimming, if I was doing anything, it was much more difficult in those days to work your way around when you did sports. So because you were having periods, and the differences at uni were even more shown up by the fact that there was the traditional university, was the men's university, this is Glasgow University. And any women, so this is very early 70s, and any women who tried to breach that, or this is the story I was told, whether it's apocryphal, was they got stripped and flung out the front steps. And that was very, very real for us. That's very threatening. At the same time, the Queen Margaret Union, which was a women's union, you could take your boyfriend in there. So there were always boys in there. So there are these things which are not balancing the whole way through. And when I started teaching, when I was just 20, in fact, in the secondary school in Cumbernauld, I was told I couldn't, by other staff, that I shouldn't wear trousers to teach. Now, I'd just come out of university where I had been in jeans for mostly for several years. Denims and Levi denim shirt was my favourite, and desert boots, so very unisex way of dressing at the time. And suddenly I was being told that I couldn't wear trousers, whereas there was a male member of staff wearing a kilt with nothing underneath, which unfortunately all we ladies knew because he made sure we knew. So I wore trousers, and what I wore was a three-piece tweed suit, which I'd made because I was brought up sewing. So waistcoat, jacket, and I wore it with a shirt and tie. And my plan was to say, if anyone challenged me, I think I am as reasonably dressed as that person over there. So what's the problem? I didn't get challenged, and within weeks, lots of teachers were wearing, female teachers were wearing trousers. Unfortunately, I had to go through the same thing again when I moved to the rural school, Castle Douglas High School, some years later. And I'd just come back from living in Paris for a year. I was teaching there. I was an English teacher there, I'm a French teacher here. And I didn't even think twice about it because the children in Paris didn't even wear school uniform. And I wore trousers in the first week. I got hauled out of class by the deputy head. I got challenged, and I said, I'm happy, I've got a class right now, I'm happy to discuss this with you when I'm not teaching and with my union representative present. So these are all the kind of things that you had to go through in order to just be treated actually the same as the men. I mean, wearing trousers was perfectly respectable. I wasn't wearing jeans, I always wore very dressy trousers. But just because I was a woman, I was having these limitations. put on me. And interesting enough, my mother had gone through very similar struggles when she was about 16 and she working. She left school at 13 to work in the laundry in Falkirk, the co-op laundry. And she and her pal from work had saved up to buy, the sort of 1940s, 1930s type trousers, very wide, Rita Hayworth or whoever, and Catherine Hepburn. And she was heading out, so this is in Falkirk, the door, and her grandfather stayed with her. And the grandfather stopped her at the door and said, "The lass of mine is heading out wearing dressed like that. You'll get right back in there and change into a skirt." My mum was really upset because she had saved up for ages for these trousers, and she was meeting her friend. But my grandmother got her inside the house in the scullery and said, "Never you mind, hen. We'll wait till the old bugger falls asleep and you go out with your trousers on." So women are constantly fighting the same battles. And I was certainly up for the fight and so on. But I think it's interesting with what we hear about social contagion now and attitudes to pregnancy and trying to balance career and pregnancy, because quite a number, at a certain point in the second half of my 20s, quite a number of my female colleagues were getting pregnant. And it's interesting, I was married, and it's interesting how it sort of gets to you and you think, oh my God, I better not leave it too late. In those days, a woman was classed as an elderly mother, elderly prima gravida, at 27, and I was 26. I was kind of sailing close to the wind there. So I did want to have children though, and I got pregnant and I had my first child. So that was quite a thing to change from someone who had a career that was driving forward. I mean, I had, when I was first married at 20, my husband was still, he'd done a law degree, but he still had to do his apprenticeship. So I was a main wage earner at 20, and with my job, I got a flat in Cumbernauld to work in Cumbernauld High School, so a corporation flat, and I wasn't allowed to sign I wasn't allowed to sign the lease papers for the flat. I wasn't able to. My husband had to sign it, although his income was almost nothing, and I was bringing in a teacher's income. My husband had to sign if I wanted to. In those days, he sometimes rented the TV, something as simple as that. I was told I had to get my husband. Of course, I was furious with all of this and kept arguing with him, but it was the way the law was, and fortunately, within about a year after that, it got changed. But I think we sometimes forget that we were second-class citizens. There's no two ways about it. I was bringing home the same wage as the man next to me. My husband was not bringing in a wage really at all, and I wasn't allowed to get a lease in the house. And I don't forget these things, and I think that women need to know about them, need to remember, because we can lose rights as quickly as that. And there's a lot of anti-feminist backlash going on at the moment, and I'm very, very worried about that. But becoming a mum and the whole pregnancy, I loved being pregnant. I blossomed. I absolutely, I wasn't sick at all, but I just loved the whole idea of growing and carrying this child. But I had a very difficult birth, which ended in an emergency section. So again, I'd never been particularly ill my whole life, and suddenly I'm having major surgery and dealing with not just a new baby, but a quite large, and fortunately it was a bikini wound, which prior to that, women quite often get cut right up the middle and had dreadful scars. So it was a bikini line wound. But suddenly you have gone through this, and then, in fact, my consultant told me afterwards, 20 years later, both I and the baby might have died. So it kind of makes you grow up very fast, but also appreciate the absolute wonder of your body, because I breastfed my child. I had as people do, you have difficulties at the start, but I found it the most rewarding experience. He was a very difficult child, bad sleeper, colic, you name it. He's not a difficult person. He was just a baby that had an immature digestive tract. And you're dealing with all that, and you really are flung into something where I think instinct has a lot to do with it. I think we really need to listen to our bodies, and we need to listen to our deep instincts about who we are. And it's not for everyone. I'm not saying every woman should have that experience at all. One of my own daughters has made a very positive choice not to. But that was me into dealing with that. And when we say about finding out who you are, you cannot find out who you are in a very simple movement overnight or in 3 months or in 6 months. Finding out who you are, I still haven't found out who I am, but I'm really enjoying the journey. I don't really expect to find out who I am. I just expect to keep learning and growing and trying to embrace the really positive aspects of that. Because I had another 2 children, and the youngest was just 2.5 when I was diagnosed with breast cancer and advised that a mastectomy, full mastectomy, was the way forward. I got a second opinion within the week while I was still in hospital after the biopsy, and the specialist, who was through from another hospital, said if I was his wife, he would be having the mastectomy the next day. So I had it a couple of days later, and I had been such an active young mother, such an active woman. I did lots of sports and things. I was I was a Labour Party activist. I was chair of the district party. I was really, really out there doing stuff all the time. And so my body has dictated the certain directions I've gone. I was already writing poetry and I say involved in politics. And I thought, when I was in the hospital, maybe you have to make choices. So it was my physical body that forced me to think, draw back from the politics, step back from that. You've got a little family, you need to give them more attention, you need to decide which direction you're going. So that was a huge transition for me, especially as I was told that I had a really high chance of developing breast cancer in the second breast. So I was to make the choice as to whether I have the second mastectomy. A year later, I had the second mastectomy. But, my female body had been so good to me up to that point. I had these 3 lovely children. I had breastfed all 3 of them. And it wasn't a difficult decision for me to make. I wanted to get on with my life. My body dictates a lot of things. I have choices sometimes within that, but I actually got over it very fast and got on with enjoying my life, being with my children, and being involved in my community and getting on with my writing. So the next big transition for me would have been probably perimenopause, and I don't think I don't feel as though these things should be exaggerated, but they should be met with. They don't need to be met with dread. They can be met with confidence. And again, compared to my husband, who's sailing through all the time with none of his male body giving him any problem whatsoever, my female body just kept playing tricks on me. So I then had, I was getting really severe migraines, which I now realise were hormonal and perimenopausal, but at the time you think, oh God, am I just a bit stressed? But I mean, really severe. I ended up on daily medication to keep it under control. It just wouldn't be controlled. And it's, but there's something very positive about that whole perimenopause driving into menopause, because I had great energy. I had a real energy burst, which made me make some changes in my life and made me feel much more, I think I know what I want to be doing here. I mean, it was sad, but I split up from my husband and I decided that, life was very much for living. And I think that really was the energy of the perimenopause. It was just like an engine roaring. The menopause itself decided to wreck my body in various ways, and I really had a lot of different symptoms, which confused me because my mother had seemed to sail through nothing at all. But my mother was a very, very strong woman. It's not that strong, not a strong woman, but my goodness, I got the challenges. And again, meanwhile, any men in my life were not having these challenges. So I remember asking a consultant when I had a friend who, when I had the breast cancer, I was asking all these questions about breast cancer, and he was explaining, because cells, obviously, it's rogue cells that start to multiply in ways that they shouldn't. And he explained to me, which I had never thought about before, about the woman's body, because of the menstrual cycle, we're in constant flux. We're in constant flux, so the chances for these rogue cells to do something they shouldn't be doing, particularly like the breasts, because they change so much during the menstrual cycle, it was much more likely. And that was when I think it really struck me just to how much my body was going through all these ups and downs and challenging me. Even if perimenopause women can get, because not everyone is the same and it's all different, but you can get absolute floods of bleeding. And you're professional, you're out doing your work, and then these things hit you. So it's not straightforward, and I think it's absolutely amazing the fact that women have kept quiet about all of this for so long and have got on with really high-powered jobs often, and or get on with their work and actually just take it all on the chin. I mean, obviously there's things we can do, but everybody's got limitations in how much they can offset these. The fact is, we get on with it, and it's one of the things I think that makes me very, very proud to be a woman, because I sort of skipped over that. When I was about 12, 13, I worried that I was a boy. Now that must sound really crazy, because you would go, but in those days we never saw nude pictures of men or boys or anything, or certainly not from my home. You wouldn't. And our parents didn't wander around in their underwear, so there were a lot of things we didn't know. And I did go through, because I was a reader, you see, and I read everything, and we had a Pear's Cyclopedia, and this does sound crazy, but I did actually discover that it was possible to be androgynous between a boy and a girl. And that started to eat at me, and I thought, maybe that's me, because I had my period at 11 and just took that in my stride. But my breasts were being slow to develop. So young people worry about these things. You worry about them, and you think, and I kind of almost settled to myself, well, maybe you're going to be androgynous, and that's that. But fortunately, everything eventually arrived, only for me to, right enough, get them removed when I was 36. But there you go. So now I'm up to going through the menopause, which I didn't enjoy, but it's fine. Just get on with it. I had all sorts of bizarre symptoms, and the joy of the menopause is you do come through it. So you come out the other side, and guess what? No menstruation. That's a real joy in my life. and of course, because I've had my children, so I felt completely happy with that, the same as having mastectomy. I had fed my children. That for me was the most important thing. So now I'm actually, I'm 69, so I'm well through most of these phases, and I decided to stop dyeing my hair, so I've got grey hair. And I think the pressures on women to, though, keep looking good are very, very high. I got hit with, I think that's the proper way to put it, I got hit with severe osteoporosis 5 years ago, and my spine I have collapsed and fractured vertebrae. I'm 2 inches shorter than I used to be, so this body is in constant flux, it never stops. And that was very painful, that was very difficult, and it has caused me, there's lots of things I'm not supposed to do anymore in case I have a fracture. And I find that quite difficult. But I've learned, as with everything else, you deal with it. You deal with it, and you keep going. And I actually, there's lots of things that I enjoy about being this age. Not least the fact that despite the osteoporosis, I'm still very busy and active, and because I'm a writer, I can still write and go out there. But the weirdest thing about being this age, and especially if it feels to me went together after I lost the 2 inches in height, because I was 5'4.5" to start with. I'm now closer to 5'2", is being kind of invisible when I'm out in the street. I cannot tell you how many times I've almost been stepped on. It's as if because I live in the city, and it's as if when I go out, so many young people just don't really see me there. And I find myself, I won't shift really, because I'm one of these people that hold my ground, but you find yourself that they're trying to put you over off the curb or into the wall. I'm not saying they're doing it on purpose, of course they're not, but there is something very strange about the way our society treats its older people. And I think that generally it's still very youth orientated, whereas I'd just like to see a bit more balance across the generations. And I do think that older men as well and older women have so much to offer. We actually do have life wisdom. You don't go through all those experiences without learning a lot, yet very seldom are we asked to contribute, or are we given credit for the fact that when we are talking about something to do with younger people, possibly we know quite a lot about it. Because I think there are extra and very difficult pressures with the internet now for our younger generations. I think that's tragic. But going back different generations, they've always had different pressures. My parents both had to come through World War II as quite young people. My mother lost her first husband on the D-Day landings. Oh, not in the landings, his plane was shot down, but on D-Day. And we actually, as a society, should be listening to older people a lot more and learning and then applying it to contemporary issues as well. We certainly shouldn't be told that we don't know anything about it and should go away. But I'm not sure what my next transition will be. Downhill all the way from here, I think. But I've loved being a woman. I absolutely love being a woman. I wish that I hadn't had so many injustices along the way, and that includes not just, again, not being listened to with the same seriousness as my male colleagues. I honestly do think that has been a thing, and I am not shrinking violet, but it would be nice to be listened to without having to risk being called shrill or pushy or the things that women aren't supposed to be, when in fact all I'm doing is contributing the same as the men at the table. And that there's certainly lots of room for improvement. But I would never have wanted to be born a man, because being born a woman has just been, for me, overall a really, really enriching and joyous experience. Thank you.